An entitled father tried to get me kicked out of the store for having big boobs. So, the only reason why the entitled parent in the story didn't go to prison was because I was 18 at the time. But the fact that this happened the way it did still pisses me off. So, when I turned 18, I started working at a call center and often walked around the city a lot in order to avoid my toxic mother. Yes, I know what you're thinking, but I was safe and always had a form of self-defense. I was young, but not stupid. Anyways, that year, I experienced another growth spurt and went from a C cup to a double D cup, and I was getting a lot of weird looks when in public. As much as I hate to say it, it was pretty young and naive, so I never thought it was because of the way my body changed, but I preferred to keep my distance from people. One day, I decided that I was going to go to Walmart so that I could pick up some yarn for a crochet project I wanted to work on while at work. We were allowed to crochet as long as we didn't avoid the calls that were automatically answered on our systems. While I was checking out the yarn, I noticed a kid, who looked like he was 13 or 14, standing at the end of the aisle watching me. Thanks to my history of getting bullied and beaten up, I immediately grew cautious and started debating if I wanted to get my yarn here or go to the Hobby Lobby across the parking lot. Before I could make a decision, an adult man came up and started leading the son off, so I started to relax and think that I was overreacting. That is, until the father came back and asked me where I got my implants from as they looked real. I was thrown back and just responded, "Excuse me?" He proceeds to repeat what he said whilst waving at my breast, which completely left me lost for words. At this moment, the kid came up and poked at my right breast, and I instinctively smacked his hand away, not caring that he was a kid. I told him, "Excuse me, but you really shouldn't do that, especially to a woman. It's not polite and it's considered sexual harassment." Entitled father immediately got mad at me and started screaming at me not to touch his son. He said that it was my fault and that if I didn't want attention like this, then I should keep my fun bags put away. I was in tears and looking around for an escape, especially since the more the father yelled at me, the closer he got to me. He started telling me that there was no way my breasts were real and that he needed to feel them to know for sure. He even told me that I needed to let the son touch them so he could learn the difference between implants and real breasts. Remembering the fact that I had pepper spray in my bag for any occasion where I needed to defend myself, I usually had a knife too, but that seemed a bit extreme in the heat of the moment. I pulled the can of pepper spray and told them both to step back and get away from me. At this point, an employee turned the corner, having heard us yelling, and saw me holding the pepper spray. He freaked out and called for the manager before coming up and yelling at me, demanding to know what I was doing. Thanks to me being in tears, the father was able to butt in and started lying to the employee that I was seducing his son and pulled my pepper spray out when he had tried to come to his son's rescue. The son immediately started agreeing with his dad, and the employee was already saying that he was going to call the police while the father demanded that me and my big breasts get kicked out of the store. Thankfully, at that second, one of my coworkers, a big burly guy who often gave me a ride at night after hearing that I took the taxi home at night because my mother refused to teach me to drive, rounded the corner, leading a manager right to the mess. The manager demanded that everyone shut up and calm down, and when we had, he turned to me and asked my side of the story. I told them how the dad insisted that I need to let them feel my breasts to see if they were real, and how I had already explained I wasn't comfortable and didn't want their attention. The dad backtracked on his story and tried to defend himself and his son, saying it was all for educational purposes, and lied that I had agreed beforehand. This is when my coworker got mad and pointed at the camera at the end of the aisle, reminding them that it would have caught everything. The entitled father and son both went silent for a moment, before making a break for the exit. The manager took off after them, yelling at them to stop, and my coworker berated the employee for threatening me the way he did. Of course, they got away. But the employee was fired, and I never went back to that store by myself per my friend's request. Please, teach your sons to respect women and don't harass women. Plenty of us are insecure of our bodies and don't want the attention our bodies attract, and we appreciate it if you don't make things worse for us. Also, never assume that a woman's body is fake or that you are entitled to touch it. I'm so sorry that happened to you. It's great that you were able to keep your cool and handle the situation like that, especially considering how it could have gone if you hadn't had pepper spray on hand. It's unfortunate that the dad lied about what happened, but at least he didn't get away with it. I'm sure it was a scary experience for you, but I hope this story can be a reminder to other women out there of how important it is to carry pepper spray in case they ever find themselves in a similar situation. Also, thank you for sharing your story so others can learn from it and know they're not alone. I went into debt helping my dad. My dad has a phone on my phone plan and his car is on my insurance. He pays $110 a month for his portion of those bills. He gave me $120 this month because he didn't have change for the $20. Cool, right? So his car broke down, radiator, fan, motor, and his car was starting to overheat due to it being disrespectfully hot here in Texas. He had a doctor's appointment on Tuesday and a dentist appointment today, Thursday. He asked me to take him. I said, sure, I'll help. Big mistake. Tuesday, I start my day at 7 a.m. and drive to Mont Bellevue from Texas City. He refuses to give me his address and instead gives me directions and landmarks. I'm by no means Lewis and Clark, and I get lost pretty quickly. So after several minutes of arguing and just begging for the address so I can GPS my way there, he gives it to me. I make it there within 8 minutes. He gets into my car and proceeds to light up a cigarette. I tell him I don't want him smoking in my car because I vape and I don't like my car smelling like cigarettes. He tells me to get over it and we need to go, so just drive. Yes, I'm fully aware I should have told him to exit my vehicle and leave him there, and in hindsight, I wish I had. We start driving and he starts going in on how immature his roommate is and just generally complaining about how awful he is. The irony of the fact that my dad behaves the same way when we live together is lost on him. We go to my appointment for an elective procedure I'd like done, and my dad uses my car while I'm inside to go and get a drink. When I come back, there's a cup outside my car. Now, just from previous experience, I know what happened here. My dad went to get a drink, and instead of using the restroom inside, he took a cup from my car, used that inside my car, and then dumped it. We go back to his appointment, and I begin my journey to take him back home. My dad gives me $35 for my time at the beginning of the day, and as we start to go back home, he says, I'm hungry. I tell him I'm happy to stop somewhere along the way so he can eat. He responds he can't afford to go out to eat. I agree it's expensive, and I also cannot afford to eat today, so I'll eat when I get back home. He follows this comment with, well, I gave you $45 extra this month. You can't pay for lunch? I'm taken aback because this $45 is the $10 extra he gave me for his portion of bills and the $35 previously mentioned. This isn't extra, this is paying for my gas at least. I refuse to pay for his lunch as he asked me to stop and eat. We go into the restaurant and he orders. He asks if I want anything and I said no, I'll have water, and he offers me lunch so I order. Total comes to $20. So if I had paid for lunch for the two of us, I'd respectfully have $15 extra for money for my gas. I finally get him back home and head home. By the time I get back to my house, I'm empty on gas. I use the $35 he gave me, and the next day I take my significant other to and from work and run my normal errands. By then, I'm close to empty. Not enough to go out to my dad's again and get him for his next appointment. So I have to borrow money from my mom, his ex-wife, and I explain my situation. She is understandably frustrated with how my dad treated me but refuses to speak to him for any reason. So today, I head out and I need to stop again for gas and I get a drink. My dad calls and asks what's taking me so long, and I say I needed to stop for gas and a drink. I get there shortly after and the complaining starts again. I eventually ask where we needed to go, and we do a few errands going from farthest to closest, so I stupidly assume after we do the farthest errand last, we can head out and I'll take him back home. First two errands go smoothly, and on the third errand, that's when it went downhill. We needed to go to the junkyard and pull a part off a car to replace his aforementioned radiator fan motor. He's incredibly picky about it, so whilst in the blazing Texas sun, 100 degrees with no shade, we trek out and find 3 different cars with the part he needs. The first 2 are aftermarket parts, not original/great value for those not in car world, and on the third car we find the exact part he needs. I managed to rip the bumper off, cut the hoses, and get the fan out. Again, all under the Texas sun. By the time we are walking back, I'm getting cold chills all over my body. The light tan ground is now turning blue, and I feel like I'm about to meet God. We safely make it inside, pay for the parts, and go back to my air-conditioned car. After a few blissful minutes of air conditioning, I ask what else we need to do today, and tell him I'm absolutely beat from pulling the part off the car. He says he wants to go to Busey's, the biggest gas station we have around here. I say, Dad, that's 25 minutes back the opposite direction. Why do we need to go there? He says he needs cigarettes and a drink, and they are cheaper there. I try and explain it's almost 30 minutes back the other way, and it'll cost me more in gas so he can save $3. He refuses to budge on going, and at this point, I just want to get him out of my car and go home. My dad also has a habit of criticizing me on my driving, so while on the way, I speed up to pass a slow-moving truck, which my dad looks at me and says, "This is why you have no gas in your car," while also saying that me driving my significant other to work and back is another reason I have no gas. Mind you, my significant other pays for the gas in my vehicle. I stay silent the whole way back to my dad's out of pure frustration and exhaustion. He then tells me, "Oh, and by the way, I'm only giving you $100 next month, since I gave you the 10 extra. At that point, I say my goodbyes and leave. I call and vent to my sister about the last 2 days of being with our father, and I promise you, I'll never do this for him again. He better hope that part he got works, because I will not be going back to help him again. I haven't helped him with anything since December when he moved out of the house we shared and he said he wanted to make amends for stuff in the past. So all in all, I drove for 442 miles round trip, spent 13.5 hours driving him around for a grand total of $2.9 an hour. Seeing how the extra $10 he gave me is not being deducted from next month's bills he owes, I got $40 for doing all this. And I'm actually $50 in debt with my mom for this. I'm mad at myself for thinking he changed and actually gave an F about anyone but himself. I'm still feeling really sick from the heat, so I'm going to try and stay hydrated and rest. I know I'll get the same comments my sister, friends, and mom told me that I need to stand up for myself and say no. I don't know why it's so hard for me to flat out tell my dad no. The thought of it gives me a panic attack. I guess I understand now why my brother, who talks to our dad regularly, ended up in the hospital with a severe panic attack. This is not even half of the entitled behavior my dad exhibits, and not to mention the blatant racism, anti-LGBTQ, I'm pansexual, the reproductive rights of people, and other horrible things he had said over the last 2 days. I left that out because honestly, his views and mine are totally different, and I did not want my post to be a platform for that. I just wanted to share my story with others who have entitled parents and maybe talk to those who have managed to overcome what I'm feeling right now. The inability to tell my victim mentality, narc, parent the word no, and not feel like it makes me a bad daughter for standing up for myself and setting hard boundaries. I imagine it must be really difficult to say no to your own parent, especially when he's not treating you well. I think that's why it's so important for us to remember how we treat our children and our parents will eventually reflect back on us. So we should always try to set a good example. You did the right thing by leaving him behind. He wasn't respecting your time or money, and he was just using you for his own gain. It's really unfortunate that your dad is such an entitled person and only cares about himself. Father still believes he's entitled to family. My father was never a great man. Before my mother found him, he was a couch-surfing bum that saw no reason to apply himself in anything. Then, he joined the military and they married shortly after. My mom was successful, running her own travel agency and all. But she gave it all up for a man with barely a penny to his name and helped him get his life together. Unfortunately, it was never easy. He was deployed a lot growing up, but when he was home, he disrupted the order of things. He always got angry over the smallest of things. One such instance, my brother had learning disabilities growing up. I clearly remember my father storming out of the house with his homework after my brother wasn't understanding a concept, only to come home an hour later having torn it up and thrown it in a random neighbor's trash can in his anger. That's how little it took to set him off, and it never got better. When I was about 10, he was discharged. While he looked for a job, my mom, brother, and I lived with my grandmother for a year. He stayed at his family member's home in another state because he couldn't live under her roof because she actually expected people to clean up after themselves, which he didn't. But he couldn't clean up his act to be able to spend time with his children, which he had already missed so much time with. Everything got worse when all 4 of us were living under one roof together. My dad, after 11 years of not really being a part of the household, had entered the picture, and things were to be his way from now on. Not that what we had going wasn't working, it just wasn't how he wanted things to be. And if you didn't listen, verbal and physical abuse followed. There have been more than a few times when we had to leave him in the house for our personal safety when he was gone too far. My brother got the worst at first, his mental disorders getting in the way of his survival instinct. So, I started stepping in to take the heat off of him. The number of times I've been told that if I kept my stupid mouth shut, I wouldn't be in trouble is too many times to count. But you can only see a 300-pound man-child throw your 100-pound little brother into wall so many times before you feel the need to do something. The unnecessary goading and picking at everyone, trying to see who he could get a rise out of and start a fight with, was also exhausting. And again, unfortunately, my brother again fell the usual victim. The thing is, I'm 5'10" and 230 pounds. I'm also relatively well-read and intelligent, so my dad was more weary of starting stuff with me because I'm not one to go down without a fight. My brother isn't either. He's just skinnier, not as quick with words, just as short-tempered, and hadn't hit his growth spurts yet. So my dad always went for the easy prey, though I did my best to defend my brother when I could, as did my mother for both of us. My brother and I begged my mother to leave him, but she wouldn't. I wouldn't find out why until last year. Now starts entitled parent. So, TLDR of the past 10 years. My dad being unable to hold a stable job for more than 2 years, living off of unemployment and disability checks for half that time, my mother's mom passing away a couple of years ago, all while having an extremely turbulent home life. Last year, I caught my dad swiping on Tinder. Of course, I told my mother, because how dare he, after everything she has done for him and put up with, decide to cheat on her. As it turns out, he wasn't getting his sexual needs fulfilled by my mother and was looking for it elsewhere. My mother, who has been losing sleep at night trying to find the money to pay bills, who is still grieving and dealing with the loss of her mother, who has herself been abused by him, was not interested in being sexually active with him. So instead of trying to communicate, he went behind her back. So my mom finally, after 21 years of marriage, files for divorce. After the next couple of months, my father, now feeling free to flaunt his activities, basically uses the house as a halfway home. We never knew when or if he was coming home until he finally moves out. Luckily, in my state, if there's no proof of infidelity, then the 1-year separation requirement for divorce does not apply. My mother got a lawyer and got everything she needed, while my father couldn't be bothered with his newfound freedom. So, post-divorce, my mother got the house and a decent sum of spousal support from my father out of the situation. Apparently, my mother couldn't divorce him before because unfortunately, our financial situation heavily relied on him since she couldn't go to work due to her own health issues. But this way, we could make things work. But due to the nature of the spousal support, my dad would need to be working, so my brother and I couldn't speak up about the child abuse we grew up with for fear of him going to jail and us not having that income. Since he's left, the house has been quieter, less fighting, just overall nicer. My father, though, still believes he has access to all of us. He still wants to be a part of the family, wants to participate in our vacations, in our outings. He comes over weekly to do his laundry, and expects my mother to make a full home-cooked meal while he's there and for all of us to spend time with him. That, after everything, my brother and I should still respect him because he's our father and our blood. Guilt trips everyone any chance he gets. Says he's trying to help when he listens to what one of us says, then twists those words to his benefit when repeating them to another. He's still trying to pit the three of us against each other so he can swoop in and fix it, though we are used to his games by now. It's just jaw-dropping to me that after everything, he expects us to still treat him like a well-respected human being, like he was a good father, and that he never should be treated like anything less. Your dad sounds like they're a terrible person who doesn't care about anyone but themselves. I'm so glad you have a mother as strong as you do, as things could have become a lot worse for you guys if your mother gave in to your father's ways. I don't understand how a man could treat his own wife and kids like that, then proceed to demand respect after the divorce. It's great that you see him much less now, and I hope you and your brother don't receive abuse from him anymore. Best of luck on your lives. My father wants to control every aspect of me and my siblings' online lives. For some context, my dad started developing some serious trust issues regarding technology, probably due to an incident around 7 years ago when I was 10. 10-year-old me stumbled into finding porn like most 10-year-olds on the internet do. But that got shut down pretty quickly by my dad, starting a righteous anger within him to protect me and my siblings from the wrongs of the internet. After this incident, my dad began locking down our internet access. Nothing extreme, mostly just porn blockers and whatnot. I also became a bit of a family disappointment / bad example, as my father would occasionally gather me and my siblings to give a lecture about why porn is bad, and I was always the person my siblings looked towards whenever those were going on. And in all honesty, I can't blame my dad for doing those things, because we were younger kids. I was 10 and my brothers were 7 and 5, and he had reason to feel the need to protect us. However, flash forward to 2 years ago, my dad decides randomly to restrict our phones to when they shut off at midnight. Ultimately, I didn't mind. I didn't have many late night conversations and was usually asleep pretty early due to school. But that summer, instead of lessening the restrictions, he tightened them, cutting off our phone time at 11 p.m., claiming that summer was our time to rest. He also at this point installed a Wi-Fi router that allowed him to see anything we looked up and began blocking things he deemed unfit. At this point, I was 15 and was starting to become weirded out by this, as I had personal parts of my life I wanted to research without having to worry about him questioning it. However, anytime I built up the courage to ask my dad about it, he would tell me that it was for my own good and assumed anything I wanted to access that he couldn't see would be things not safe for work. Things weren't great, but not terrible either. I was fine with things. I had some social media and I have a very loving significant other who was able to ask my more personal research questions. However, this all changed last September. From what I was told how this incident started was my dad heard my brother listening to explicit music that swore, on his PC, which was the only PC in the house that wasn't used for work, which made it more of a PC for my other brothers, and me as well. So when my father found music he considered demonic, the artist Lemon Demon, and more legitimately explicit music, my brother pinned it on me. Initially, I tried to defend myself. I hadn't been on his PC in a month. However, my brother who owns the PC is the family golden child, and I'm the family scapegoat when it comes to technology. So I gave in and took the blame. What I didn't expect was my father to punish us all anyway. His reaction to this was to take away all privileges on our phones and limit everything. In this process, he swapped around our phones, downgrading my phone just to add insult to injury. I like to describe my old phone as neutered and declawed, because that's what it was. It had all of its features removed, and what it couldn't remove, it had limited to a barely usable state. I lost all social media, which is how I contacted a majority of my friends. My few games I had on there had been removed and replaced with a single game my dad likes. I had no access to the internet, so research wasn't even an option anymore. No more App Store, and even if I could get it back, I would need my dad's Apple ID to do anything in there. My time had been limited even further, from 9:30 p.m. to 6 a.m. I could now do absolutely nothing on my phone outside of make calls, which became my main method of communication. It took me a while to figure out why he did that, and why he still thinks punching me this severely at 16 was okay. Though quite frankly, I'm still so upset I wish I didn't. He's doing it because he wants control over quite literally everything me and my brothers see and do online. The main reason he got rid of social media was that he didn't like the fact that my brothers could make their own opinions on how things work like I did. That they'd have to come to my dad for news about the modern world. Whatever my dad's version of the story would be, whatever my brothers heard. He wanted to do the same thing by limiting us to only our default messages. My dad has never been a fan of my friends. He's admitted that to me. Though doing this really feels like a cheap way to monitor what my siblings' friends are like. And that's the current state of things. But original poster, how did you access Reddit to make this post then? Thank you for pointing that out, dear reader. The only reason I can access Reddit is due to my cousin who randomly decided to give me their old phone. And I've been taking the SIM card from my old phone in and out of my phones whenever I get the chance, and not using the Wi-Fi and keeping this away from my dad. However, I decided to make this post as the reasoning behind his decision still baffles me to this day. I'm almost 17 now, and his sheltering has become nothing but harmful in recent years. So I've decided to share this and hope that if he somehow finds it, he may realize what he's doing is a mistake. I'm really sorry you had to go through all that. It sounds like your dad has some mental health issues. But I don't know anything about him, so it's hard to say for sure. But the way he treats you and your brothers is terrible. I feel bad for you guys. He needs to stop being so protective and just let his kids out into the real world. I think it's a good idea you made this post because there may be others in similar situations that can help people understand what you're going through and possibly even share support. If you enjoyed these stories, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell. Check out the other videos on your screen right now. Otherwise, you're definitely the jerk.